Josh, I want to turn to you, and when, of course, you're the guy everybody turns to when all of these risks we're talking about here eventuate, and plans show up, pension plans show up on your doorstep. Let me pose this question to you. Setting aside for a second Damon's comment about let's just do super Social Security and forget about all this, right. But I don't think we're going to get that done here today.
Yes. Yes.
So we're talking about the proposals that have been discussed here are plans which are defined benefit plans. I think could be categorized as defined benefit plans in our system. I think Karen would probably argue you don't need a PBGC for what she's talking about because you don't need a residual insurance agency. But your task at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation really is sort of two things. One is keeping your premium base from shrinking, which is what's happening right now. And secondly, having plans that you're insuring being well-funded and not in danger of becoming severely underfunded in the hands of an employer that can no longer afford to get them up to speed. And I guess my question is do these designs sound like something that might be attractive to you? If they can keep people in the defined benefit system, maybe expand the number of companies and employers that are in the defined benefit system in your insurance program, and at a much lower level of risk of becoming underfunded, I mean, is that something that's attractive? I mean, do you have any reactions to everything that's been said so far?
I have a bunch of reactions. One is that a panel on which Judy Mazo says she's not an expert and Mark Avery is in the audience suggests to me that I should be in the hall. And what I'm going to say is, A, not about PBGC finances and not about PBGC policy in any, or administration policy. I'll take Michael Krebs's form of demur on that. The reason why I think PBGC's finances are irrelevant to this conversation is because those finances, although quite unsound, are neither going to be solved or destroyed by anything in today's discussion. There is a separate discussion, which unfortunately is one of the many burdens that Tom and Michael and Greg and those guys have, about putting PBGC on a sound basis. I want to take that off the table because I think it is irrelevant to the discussion we have here. I also think you missed, from my perspective, the most important part of my job's mandate, which is the first part of it, which is we're supposed to preserve voluntary pension plans. And so, given the fact that I think I can safely say I'm the least expert person in the room on pensions, nonetheless, having been sojourned in this world for a year and a half, I think there are some observations that as Damon points out, sometimes the simplest observations are ones that are worth making. So with your permission, I'll make a couple. One is that the world of pensions has gotten to the point where it is sufficiently complicated that many businesses simply don't want to deal with it at all. Now, part of that complication, in fact, is that it is a necessarily complicated subject. The other part of it is that we in the government have made it complicated. That we have, over time, with very good intentions, repeatedly said, if you want to offer a pension plan, you have to do this and this and this. And then somebody made a mistake and we did, and it said, well, in addition to doing this and this and this, you need to do that and that and that. I'm going to mention a couple just to point out things. When ERISA was passed, the fundamental notion was if you're going to offer a pension plan, it should be a funded plan. And there were some notions of minimum funding requirements. Over time, those minimum funding requirements were made tougher and tougher. Mark Ugoretz mentioned this morning that those minimum funding requirements were tough for businesses to swallow. Looking at those, are we actually surprised that given that increasing requirement that a lot of businesses would say, I'm going to get out of the defined benefit business and move into the defined contribution world? I personally don't think that's so surprising. And one of the questions that ought to be on the table is, have we made the right set of trade-offs? Or are we being overly prescriptive and keeping people from getting some of the benefits of the defined benefit structure, which is that people don't have to be, as Damon pointed out, notwithstanding his MBA and his JD from Harvard, they don't have to be investment experts. They don't have to be their own actuaries. But what we've said is that if an employer wants to take those burdens off their employees, they have to also meet an additional set of hoops. And the consequence of those additional set of hoops is that some employers are saying, I've had enough, I'm getting out. And I think that is damaging to retirement security. The second consequence of this is that there is a large class of employers who don't offer any retirement system at all. And I think one of the challenges that we should never forget, Damon reminded us, but we should never forget is that if we can find ways to simplify things, if we can find ways to make them easier, we may also be able to deal with the 1/2 of American workers who don't have any employer retirement pension plan at all. I think what this takes, however, is it takes a change in practice. Pension law, because it is done by all of you who are very smart and very knowledgeable and very complicated, is very complicated and very specific. It doesn't leave a lot of discretion, and it leaves less and less discretions to employers and employees, and if they're lucky enough to be represented by a union, they're unions. I think if we're going, Richard, to advance this discussion, both the Senate Finance Committee and the Senate Health Committee and their corresponding committees in the House, and the folks in the Mark and his colleagues in the Department of Treasury and the folks in the Department of Labor and on occasion the PBGC are going to have to allow more discretion and less prescription. Because otherwise what we are going to do is we are going to make it really, really, really difficult for anybody even to try any of these ideas.
Thank you very much, Josh. I think